Takumi Arai was 25, an Omega, and a single father with no safety net left. By 6 in the morning, everything had already gone wrong. The woman who usually watched his son called in tears, her voice shaking as she said she couldn't even stand up today. Takumi checked his bank account right after that call and saw a number that didn't even cover 2 days of formula. Calling in sick was not an option because one more absence meant termination, and losing this job meant losing the apartment within a week. So by the time the snow started falling harder outside, Takumi had already made the decision he hated the most. He wrapped his 8-month-old son Haru tightly in a blanket, kissed his forehead, and told himself this was just for one shift. Callaway's was not just a restaurant. It was owned by Ren Callaway, a high-ranking alpha in the underground network, the kind of man whose name people lowered their voices around. Takumi had worked there for 11 months without making a single mistake that anyone could write down. He kept his head down, did his job, and avoided trouble. That was how Omegas like him survived. He entered through the back like always, moving past the prep cooks who didn't even look up, carrying the diaper bag on one shoulder and trying to act like nothing was different. The storage room near the service corridor was the only place he could think of. It was small, quiet, and rarely used during pre-service hours. Takumi quickly spread a folded tablecloth on the floor, placed the padded insert from the diaper bag on top, and gently laid Haru down. The baby looked up at him with those calm, dark eyes that always made Takumi feel like his son understood more than he should. "I need you to be good today," Takumi whispered, pressing his forehead against Haru's. He placed a soft toy within reach, adjusted the blanket, and left the door slightly open. He didn't realize the gap aligned directly with the dim staircase leading down to the private level, where faint light and something else drifted upward. Something only an Omega would notice. Takumi forced himself to walk away. Every instinct told him to stay, but instinct didn't pay rent. He stepped onto the floor, tied his apron, and began his shift. Orders came in quickly, voices layered over each other, and the rhythm of the restaurant pulled him in. For a while, he managed to focus. At 3:15, he slipped back to check. Haru was still there, quiet, one small hand near his mouth. At 4 o'clock, same thing. Still safe. Still asleep. That should have been enough reassurance. But something in Takumi's chest never settled. By 5:20, that feeling turned into panic. He pushed the storage room door open and froze. The tablecloth was there. The toy was there. Haru was gone. Takumi moved fast, but silently. Calling out would draw attention, and attention would end everything. He checked behind the dish station, inside the linen closet, near the loading dock. Nothing. His heart was beating so hard he could feel it in his throat. Then his eyes locked onto the staircase door at the end of the corridor. The one that didn't officially exist for staff. The one that led to Ren Callaway's private office. The door was slightly open, just enough for a thin line of warm light to cut across the floor. Takumi's hands were shaking as he walked toward it. Every story he had heard about Ren flashed through his mind. Alpha. Ruthless. Untouchable. The kind of man who erased problems instead of solving them. Takumi had never even looked directly at him before. But right now, none of that mattered. His son was somewhere beyond that door. He pushed it open and stepped onto the staircase. The air changed immediately. Warmer, heavier, carrying a scent that made his body tense without permission. It wasn't overwhelming, but it was unmistakable. Alpha pheromone. Strong, controlled, and steady. Takumi swallowed hard and continued down. Each step felt louder than it should have, even though he was barely making a sound. At the bottom, the door to the office was already slightly open. He hesitated for a second, then pushed it wider. Ren Callaway was sitting in a leather chair behind a low desk, eyes closed, head tilted back slightly as if he had fallen asleep without intending to. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a black shirt with the top buttons undone. His presence filling the room even in stillness. His hair was slicked back, and there was a faint scar along his jaw that Takumi had never noticed from a distance. But none of that was what stopped Takumi from breathing. Haru was in his arms. The baby was curled against Ren's chest, one tiny hand gripping the fabric of his shirt. His breathing was slow and even, completely relaxed. Ren's arm was wrapped around him with a level of care that didn't match the man's reputation at all. It didn't look forced. It looked instinctive, like something his body had decided on its own. Takumi stood in the doorway, unable to move. He had expected anger, danger, something immediate and sharp. Instead, he was looking at the most feared alpha in the city, holding his son like he was something fragile and important. Ren opened his eyes. It wasn't sudden. It was controlled, like he had surfaced from sleep fully aware. His gaze landed on Takumi instantly, sharp and cold by habit. Then it shifted, just slightly, when he looked down at the baby in his arms. "He came down the stairs," Ren said quietly, his voice lower than Takumi expected. "Sat outside the door and just looked in." Takumi tried to speak, but nothing came out. His throat felt too tight. "He didn't cry," Ren continued, adjusting his hand just enough to support Haru's back without waking him. "Just watched for a while. Then he decided this was fine." Takumi finally managed to force out words, his voice barely steady. He started apologizing, explaining about the lack of childcare, the risk, the desperation. Ren cut him off with a single word, not loud, but absolute. "Stop." Takumi stopped immediately. Ren looked at him for a long moment, then back at the baby, then at him again. His expression didn't match what Takumi expected. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even annoyance. It was something more complicated, something that felt like he was seeing Takumi for the first time. "Pull a chair over," Ren said, nodding toward the side. "Sit down before you fall." Takumi obeyed without thinking, his legs already weak. He sat on the edge of the chair, eyes fixed on Haru. The room was quiet in a way that felt unreal compared to the chaos upstairs. He could still smell the alpha pheromone, but it wasn't suffocating. It was steady, grounding. "What's his name?" Ren asked. "Haru," Takumi answered. Ren repeated it under his breath, like he was testing how it felt. His hand moved lightly across the baby's back, a slow, unconscious motion. "He's calm," he said. "Too calm for his age." Takumi nodded, unable to stop the small note of pride in his voice. "He's always been like that." From upstairs, the sound of footsteps and voices started to grow louder. The shift was picking up. Reality was catching up. Takumi looked at his son, then at the alpha holding him, and realized something that made his chest tighten. For the first time since he had walked into that building, Haru looked completely safe. Takumi stayed where he was, perched on the edge of the chair, watching every small movement Ren made with Haru like it might disappear if he blinked. The baby shifted once, a tiny sound in his throat, then settled again, pressing closer into the alpha's chest. Ren didn't look down immediately, but his hand adjusted without hesitation, fingers spreading just enough to support the child's back more securely. It wasn't a learned motion. It was automatic, like muscle memory from a life Takumi didn't know about. "You should be upstairs," Ren said after a moment, his gaze still on the baby. His voice was quiet, but it carried the kind of authority that didn't need volume. "I can't leave him," Takumi replied before he could stop himself. His hands tightened together in his lap. "I won't leave him again." Ren finally looked at him fully. Up close, those pale blue eyes were sharper than Takumi expected, like they missed nothing. But there was no immediate threat in them, not directed at him. "He's not going anywhere," Ren said. "Not from here." The words landed heavier than they should have. Takumi realized he believed him. That was the unsettling part. Trust wasn't something he gave easily, especially not to an alpha like this. But something in the way Ren held Haru made it hard to doubt. "What were you thinking?" Ren asked, not accusing, just direct. Takumi exhaled slowly, forcing himself to answer honestly. "That if I didn't come in today, I'd lose my job. And if I lose my job, I lose everything else right after." He paused, then added, "I didn't have another option." Ren held his gaze for a second longer, then gave a slight nod, like he was confirming something already calculated. You've worked here 11 months, he said. No complaints. No incidents. Always on time. Takumi blinked. You know that. I know everything that matters in my building, Rin replied simply. There was no arrogance in it, just fact. Haru stirred again, this time letting out a small, soft whine. Takumi leaned forward instinctively, but Ren's hand moved first, pressing gently against the baby's back. The room filled just slightly with a deeper note of alpha pheromone. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't overwhelming. It was steady, controlled, and focused. Haru's body relaxed almost immediately. The tension in his tiny shoulders disappeared, his breathing smoothing out again like nothing had happened. Takumi froze. He had seen Haru get fussy before, had spent nights walking back and forth trying to calm him down. It had never been that fast, never that effortless. Rin noticed the shift in Takumi's expression. His scent is unstable, he said. Not severe yet, but it will be. Takumi's chest tightened. What does that mean? It means he's an Omega without a stable alpha presence, Rin replied. He adjusted his hold again, more carefully this time, like he was aware of every inch of contact. When he gets older, it won't just be restlessness. It will be pain, fever, breathing issues if it gets bad enough. Takumi stared at him, his mind struggling to keep up. I didn't know. You wouldn't, Rin said. Not without someone telling you. Silence settled between them again, but it wasn't empty. It was heavy with something Takumi didn't have a name for yet. Footsteps echoed faintly from the stairs above. Fast, confident, not someone trying to be quiet. Ren's eyes shifted toward the door instantly, the softness from before disappearing behind something sharper. A second later, the door pushed open wider and a man stepped in without knocking. William Graves, floor manager, beta, mid-30s, always perfectly put together and always watching a little too closely. He stopped when he saw the scene in front of him. His gaze flicked from Takumi to the baby to Ren. For a brief moment, something dark passed through his expression before it smoothed out. I heard there was an issue in the back, William said, tone neutral but edged. And now I see why. Takumi's stomach dropped. Ren didn't move. It's handled, he said. William took a step further into the room, his eyes narrowing slightly as he looked at Haru. An unauthorized child in the building is not a small issue, he replied. Especially not one that wandered down here. He didn't wander, Ren said. His voice hadn't changed, but the temperature in the room did. He came to a place that was open. William's lips pressed together briefly. With respect, that doesn't change the policy. Staff bringing children into policy, Ren cut in, finally lifting his gaze fully to meet William's, is something I decide. The silence that followed was immediate and heavy. Takumi felt it press against his skin. William held Ren's stare for a second too long before stepping back half a pace. A controlled retreat. Of course, William said, the words smooth but tight. I just assumed you'd want to be aware of potential risks. I am aware, Ren replied. William's gaze shifted again to Haru, lingering there in a way that made something in Takumi's chest twist. Not concern. Calculation. Then it flicked back to Takumi, sharper now. You should be grateful, he said quietly. Not everyone gets this kind of exception. Takumi didn't answer. He couldn't trust his voice. Ren's attention snapped back to William. Go back upstairs, he said. Keep the floor moving. I'll deal with anything that comes from this. William hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, then nodded. Understood. He turned and left, but not before casting one last look over his shoulder. The door closed. The room felt different immediately. Not safer exactly, but contained again. Takumi let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He's going to report this, he said quietly. No, Ren replied. Takumi looked up. How do you know? Because if he does, he loses the ability to use it himself, Ren said. He shifted slightly, and Haru made a small sound but didn't wake. And he's the kind of man who prefers leverage over rules. The words settled heavily. Takumi understood enough to feel uneasy, even if he didn't know the full picture. I should take him, Takumi said after a moment, even though his body didn't move. Ren didn't hand Haru over immediately. He looked down at the baby again, something unreadable passing through his expression. Then, slowly, he stood, careful not to jostle the small body in his arms. He stepped closer to Takumi, close enough that the alpha scent was stronger now, wrapping around him without permission. Takumi's breath hitched slightly. He hated that his body reacted, but he couldn't stop it. Ren noticed. Of course he did. But instead of pressing closer, he stopped just short, keeping a deliberate distance as he lowered Haru into Takumi's arms. The baby stirred, then immediately curled into Takumi, fingers gripping his shirt just as tightly. Keep him here, Ren said. Takumi blinked. What? During your shift, Ren clarified. This room is safer than anywhere else in this building. Takumi stared at him, trying to process that. You're letting me? I'm deciding it, Ren corrected. He stepped back, putting space between them again. And I don't repeat decisions. Takumi swallowed, holding Haru closer. The weight of what was happening pressed down on him all at once. Why? He asked quietly. Ren looked at him for a long moment, the answer not coming immediately. Then his gaze shifted briefly to the baby, then back to Takumi. Because someone should have, he said. Takumi didn't fully understand what that meant. Not yet. But the way Ren said it made it clear it wasn't something small. From upstairs, the noise of the dinner service starting to build reached them more clearly now. Orders, voices, movement. The world Takumi couldn't escape was still waiting for him. He adjusted Haru against his chest, then looked back at Ren. For the first time, the fear wasn't the strongest thing in his chest anymore. It was something else. Something uncertain, but steady. And somewhere behind that, a quiet realization was beginning to take shape. The most dangerous man in this building had just become the only person Takumi could trust to keep his son safe. Takumi returned to the floor with Haru's warmth still lingering against his chest, even though he had left the baby downstairs under Ren's watch. Every step felt wrong at first, like he was abandoning something fragile, but he forced himself into motion. Orders didn't slow down just because his world had shifted. Plates needed to be carried, drinks needed to be poured, and mistakes here were noticed immediately. He moved on instinct, letting muscle memory take over while his mind stayed fixed on the office below, replaying the image of Ren holding Haru with impossible gentleness. William found him within minutes. He didn't raise his voice or cause a scene, but the way he stepped into Takumi's path made it clear this wasn't casual. You're still on the floor, William said, tone smooth but tight around the edges. I expected you to be packing your things by now. Takumi kept his posture straight. Mr. Calloway told me to continue my shift. William's eyes sharpened slightly at that. For a second, something colder slipped through his usual control. Did he said quietly. That's interesting. He leaned in just enough that only Takumi could hear him. Do you know how rare it is for him to make exceptions? Takumi didn't answer. He didn't need to. William straightened, the polite mask sliding back into place. Be careful, he added almost lightly. Attention like that doesn't come without consequences. Then he turned and walked away, already signaling another server to cover a table. Takumi exhaled slowly, steadying himself before moving again. He knew William wasn't finished. The look in his eyes had been too calculated, too interested. It wasn't just about breaking a rule. It was about finding an opening. The next hour blurred into motion. Takumi worked faster than usual, not because he wanted to impress anyone, but because he needed to create small gaps in his schedule. At 6:10, he slipped away for less than a minute, taking the stairs down as quietly as before. The door to Ren's office was closed this time, but not locked. Inside, the lighting hadn't changed. Ren was at the desk now, awake, focused on something in front of him. Haru was no longer in his arms. The baby lay on the leather couch, wrapped in a dark jacket that was far too expensive to be used as a blanket. His small chest rose and fell steadily, completely at ease. Takumi stepped in and closed the door behind him. "I just needed to check," he said, keeping his voice low. Ren didn't look surprised. "He hasn't moved," he replied. "Barely made a sound." Takumi approached the couch, crouching slightly to adjust the blanket. Haru's fingers curled instinctively around the edge of the fabric, still asleep. Takumi let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "You can't keep leaving your post," Rin said from behind him. Not harsh, just direct. "I know," Takumi admitted, straightening. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to." Rin studied him for a moment, then leaned back slightly in his chair. 5 minutes every hour," he said. "No more. I'll have someone cover the gap without drawing attention." Takumi blinked, surprised again. "You don't have to do that." "I already decided to," Rin replied. "Don't make me repeat it." Takumi nodded once. There wasn't anything else to say. Before he could leave, Rin spoke again. "William," he said, like it was a separate topic. Takumi paused, turning slightly. "He's watching you," Rin continued. "Not because of the rule you broke. Because of what he thinks it gives him." Takumi's stomach tightened. "Leverage," he said quietly, remembering Ren's earlier words. Ren nodded. "He won't act directly. Not yet. He'll look for a way to turn this into something bigger." Takumi glanced at Haru, then back at Ren. "Should I be worried?" Ren's expression didn't change, but there was something colder under it now. "You should be aware," he said. "Worry doesn't help. Preparation does." Takumi held his gaze for a second longer, then nodded again and left. Upstairs, the dinner rush hit in full force. Every table was filled, voices overlapping, orders stacking faster than the kitchen could handle. Takumi moved through it all, more focused now, sharper. If William was watching, then he wouldn't give him anything else to use. At 7:05, he noticed something off. 2 men at a corner table weren't eating. They weren't even pretending to. Their eyes tracked the staff instead, pausing on Takumi longer than they should have. One of them leaned closer to the other, speaking low. Takumi felt it immediately. Not danger he could prove, but something wrong enough to trigger instinct. He didn't approach the table. Instead, he shifted his route, passing close enough to catch fragments of their conversation. "The kid," one of them said under his breath. "Downstairs." Takumi's pulse spiked. He kept moving, not reacting, but his mind was already racing. They shouldn't know. No one should know. He finished his current order, then headed straight for the service station where one of the bartenders stood. "Can you cover table 9 for a minute?" he asked quickly. The bartender glanced at him, then nodded. "Go." Takumi didn't hesitate. He moved toward the back corridor, but instead of going straight to the stairs, he stopped just short of the corner and looked back. The 2 men had stood up. One of them was already heading toward the hallway that led to the restricted staircase. Takumi's chest tightened. He turned and moved fast, taking the shorter route through the kitchen, slipping past staff who barely noticed him. By the time he reached the staircase, the door was already slightly open again. He didn't think. He pushed it and went down. The office door was ajar. Voices came from inside. "Just the kid," one of the men was saying. "Quick and quiet." Takumi stepped in without stopping. "Get away from him," he said, his voice sharper than he expected. Both men turned. They weren't staff. Not regular customers either. Their expressions shifted immediately from calculation to annoyance. Run was already on his feet. He had moved faster than Takumi had ever seen, positioning himself between the men and the couch without hesitation. The air in the room changed instantly, alpha pheromones spiking just enough to press down on everything. "This area is restricted," Rin said, his voice low and controlled in a way that felt more dangerous than shouting. "You shouldn't be here." One of the men smirked slightly. "We're just looking around," he said. "Didn't realize you were keeping something valuable down here." Takumi felt the word land like a threat. Valuable, not a child. Ren didn't respond immediately. He took one step forward, slow and deliberate. "You're leaving," he said. The second man shifted his stance, like he was considering pushing it further. For a second, Takumi thought it might escalate into something worse. Then the first man raised a hand slightly, signaling him to stop. "Not tonight," he muttered. They backed off, but not before casting one last look at Haru on the couch. Then they turned and left, footsteps echoing up the stairs. The silence that followed was heavy. Takumi's hands were shaking now, the adrenaline catching up all at once. "They knew," he said, his voice unsteady. "They knew he was here." Ren's gaze remained fixed on the door for another second before he spoke. "Yes," he said. Takumi looked at him. "How?" Ren finally turned back, his expression colder than before. "Because someone told them." Takumi didn't answer right away. The implication hung in the air between them, heavy and unavoidable. Someone inside had talked. Someone who knew the layout, the routines, and the fact that a child was being kept in a place no one was supposed to enter. He didn't need to say the name out loud for it to take shape in both their minds. "William." Ren moved first, crossing the room to the door and closing it fully this time. The quiet click of the lock felt louder than it should have. When he turned back, the controlled calm from earlier had shifted into something sharper, more precise. "From now on, no one comes down here without my permission," he said. "Not staff. Not guests. No exceptions." Takumi nodded, still trying to steady his breathing. He moved closer to the couch, checking Haru. The baby had stirred during the confrontation but hadn't fully woken, his small face tightening slightly before relaxing again. Takumi brushed his fingers gently across Haru's cheek, grounding himself through the contact. "They called him valuable," Takumi said quietly, not looking up. "They didn't see him as a child." Ren's gaze darkened. "People like that don't see anything as what it is," he replied. "Only what it can be used for." Takumi swallowed. He knew that world existed, but hearing it this close, tied directly to his son, made it real in a way he couldn't ignore. "You said to be aware," he continued. "What does that actually mean?" Ren didn't answer immediately. He walked to the desk, picked up his phone, and sent 2 short messages without explanation. Only after that did he look back at Takumi. "It means this is no longer just about a rule you broke," he said. "It's about who benefits from turning that into something bigger." Takumi straightened slowly, his eyes narrowing. "William." "Yes." Ren didn't hesitate. "He's been building something behind my back for a while. Small things. Quiet things. This just gave him something more concrete." Takumi felt a cold weight settle in his chest. "So he told them about Haru." "He didn't need to say everything," Ren replied. "Just enough to attract attention." He paused, then added, "And attention is exactly what we don't want on an Omega child without protection." The word protection landed differently now. Not theoretical. Not distant. Immediate. Haru shifted again, this time letting out a small, strained sound. Takumi's focus snapped back instantly. "He's waking," he murmured, leaning closer. The baby's brows drew together, his breathing uneven for a second before it hitched into a soft cry. Takumi picked him up carefully, holding him close. "It's okay," he whispered, rocking slightly, but something was off. Haru's body felt warmer than it should have, his small hands curling tighter than usual against Takumi's shirt. Ren was already watching. "His scent is fluctuating," he said. Takumi frowned. "What does that mean right now?" "It means he's reacting," Ren replied, stepping closer but not crowding. "Stress. Change in environment. Too many unfamiliar scents." Haru's cry sharpened, more distressed now. Takumi tried to soothe him, adjusting his hold, murmuring softly, but it wasn't working the way it usually did. Panic began to rise again, slower this time but just as heavy. "He doesn't cry like this," Takumi said, his voice tightening. "He's usually calm," Ren finished. Takumi nodded, his grip tightening instinctively. What do I do? Ren took another step closer, stopping just within reach. You let me help, he said. There was no hesitation in his tone, but there was something else there too. Restraint. Control. Like he was choosing each movement carefully. Takumi hesitated for a fraction of a second, then nodded. Ren lifted his hand slowly, giving Takumi time to pull back if he wanted. When Takumi didn't, Ren rested his palm lightly against Haru's back, just below the shoulder blades. The shift was immediate. The alpha pheromone in the room deepened, not spreading wildly but focusing, wrapping around the small, tense body in Takumi's arms. Haru's cry broke off mid-sound. His body stilled, then softened, the tension draining out of him in seconds. His breathing steadied again, small fingers loosening their grip. Takumi froze. He had seen Haru calm down before, but never like that. Never this fast. Never this completely. It's okay, Ren said quietly, more to the child than to Takumi. His hand didn't move away right away, maintaining the contact just long enough to stabilize the shift. Takumi's breath caught slightly. He could feel it too now, not as intensely as Haru, but enough. The pheromone wasn't overwhelming. It didn't press down or force submission. It was steady, grounding, and his body, traitorous as it was, responded to it. The tightness in his chest eased. The edge of panic dulled. Ren noticed. Of course he did. His eyes flicked up briefly to Takumi's face, taking in the reaction, then dropped again. He didn't move closer. He didn't push. After a moment, he withdrew his hand completely. Takumi swallowed, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. Thank you, he said quietly. Ren nodded once. He'll be fine, he replied. But this is what I meant. Without a stable alpha presence, episodes like that will get worse. Takumi looked down at Haru, who was already drifting back towards sleep, completely unaware of what had just happened. I can't give him that, he said almost to himself. Ren didn't answer immediately. The silence stretched, not uncomfortable, but heavy with something unspoken. You don't have to solve everything at once, Ren said finally. Takumi let out a small breath that almost sounded like a laugh. That's easy to say when you're not the one running out of options. Ren's expression shifted slightly, something sharper beneath the calm. I didn't say it was easy, he replied. I said you don't have to do it alone. Takumi looked up at him then, really looked. There was no pity in Ren's face. No condescensión. Just a statement, clear and direct. It unsettled him more than anything else had so far. From upstairs, the noise of the restaurant surged again, louder now as the peak of dinner service hit. Time was moving whether they were ready or not. Takumi adjusted Haru in his arms, holding him a little closer than before. I need to go back, he said. Ren nodded. I'll have someone posted outside the stairwell, he replied. No one gets through without being stopped. Takumi hesitated, then asked the question that had been building since the confrontation. And William? Ren's gaze hardened. I'll handle him. There was something final in the way he said it that made Takumi believe him completely. He turned toward the door, then paused, glancing back once more. Ren was already watching him, not in the distant, assessing way from before, but with a focus that felt more deliberate now. Takumi didn't know what to do with that yet. He just knew that something had shifted, not just in the situation but between them. He left the office and went back upstairs, stepping into the noise and movement of the restaurant again. But this time, the fear wasn't the only thing driving him. There was something else now, something steadier. And somewhere behind that, a realization was beginning to take shape, slow but certain. The line between survival and something more had just started to blur. The moment Takumi stepped back onto the floor, he knew something was wrong. Not the usual tension of a busy night. Not the controlled chaos of a restaurant pushing past capacity. This was different. The air felt tighter, like something had already been set in motion and he was a step behind it. He moved quickly through his section, scanning faces without looking like he was scanning. The two men from earlier were gone. That should have been a relief. It wasn't. At 7:42, the lights flickered once. Then everything went dark. The room erupted immediately. Chairs scraped, voices rose. Someone dropped a glass that shattered across the floor. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, casting the entire space in a dull, uneven glow. It was just enough to see shapes, not enough to feel safe. Takumi's first thought wasn't about the guests or the shift. It was Haru. He didn't wait. He moved. Fast. Through the kitchen, past staff trying to regain control, straight toward the back corridor. Someone called his name, but he didn't stop. By the time he reached the stairwell, the guard Ren had placed there was already on the ground. Not unconscious. Not dead. Just long enough out of the way to let someone pass. Takumi's chest went cold. He took the stairs 2 at a time, not caring about the noise anymore. The office door was open. Empty. The couch was there. The jacket was there. Haru wasn't. For a second, everything stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. Then it came back all at once, sharp and unbearable. Takumi moved without thinking, searching corners that didn't make sense to search, calling his son's name under his breath like it would somehow bring him back. Footsteps behind him. Ren. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't need to. His eyes took in the room in one sweep. The open door, the empty couch, the displaced guard outside. Something in his expression shifted instantly, all restraint gone in a single breath. Who was here? Ren asked. Takumi shook his head, his voice breaking despite himself. I don't know. I came as fast as I could. He's gone. Ren's jaw tightened, just once. Then everything about him went still. Too still. The kind of stillness that came right before violence. He pulled his phone out, already dialing. Lock the building, he said the second the line connected. No one in or out. Every exit covered. He paused, listening, then added, and find graves. Now. Takumi's stomach dropped at the name. William. Yes, Ren said, already moving. Stay here. No, Takumi stepped forward immediately. I'm not staying here. Ren stopped just short of the door, turning back. For a second, it looked like he might argue. Then he didn't. Then stay behind me, he said. And don't hesitate if I tell you to move. They went up together. The restaurant was half-controlled chaos now. Staff trying to calm guests. Security moving through the crowd with purpose. Ren didn't slow down. People moved out of his way without being told. They found William near the service station, speaking to 2 staff members like nothing was wrong. He looked up as Ren approached, and for a split second, there it was. Not surprise. Not confusion. Recognition. Ren didn't waste time. He grabbed William by the collar and slammed him back against the wall hard enough to silence everything nearby. Where is he? Ren asked, his voice low but carrying across the space. William's expression twisted, but he didn't immediately break. I don't know what you're talking about, he said. Ren's grip tightened. Wrong answer. Takumi stepped closer, his hands shaking but his voice steady enough. They knew about Haru, he said. They were in your office earlier. They came for him. William's eyes flicked to him, something sharp and ugly surfacing. Then maybe you shouldn't have brought him here, he replied. Ren hit him. Not a wild swing. Controlled. Precise. Enough to snap his head to the side and draw blood immediately. The room went completely silent this time. Where, Ren repeated, is the child? William laughed, breath uneven now but still defiant. You really think this is about a child? He said. He's leverage. That's all. And now you finally understand what it feels like to have something to lose. Takumi felt the words hit like a physical blow. Ren didn't respond with another strike. Instead, he leaned in slightly, his voice dropping lower. If anything happens to him, he said, there won't be a place left for you to stand in this city. William's smile faltered for the first time. Just slightly. Then he exhaled, shaking his head. Warehouse on the east side, he said finally. Old shipping district. They'll be waiting. Ren let him go. Not gently. William slid down the wall, coughing, trying to catch his breath. Lock him in the office, Ren ordered one of the security men who had moved in. He doesn't leave until I say so. Then he turned, already moving again. Takumi followed without hesitation. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need details. He just needed to get there. The drive was fast. Too fast. Takumi barely registered the streets passing by, the way the city blurred into streaks of light and shadow. Ren didn't speak. His focus was absolute, hands steady on the wheel, eyes fixed ahead. The air in the car felt different, heavier. The alpha presence no longer controlled for comfort but held tight like something barely contained. When they reached the warehouse, Ren didn't wait for backup. He stepped out and moved straight for the entrance. Takumi stayed close, every instinct screaming at him but none of it strong enough to make him stop. Inside it was quiet, too quiet. Then a voice echoed from deeper within. Right on time. They stepped into the open space. Haru was there, held by one of the men from earlier. The baby was awake now, small sounds of distress breaking through the silence. Takumi moved forward immediately, but Ren's arm blocked him. Not yet, he said under his breath. Another man stepped out, slower, more confident. You know the terms, he said. Transfer the route. Walk away. You get the kid back. Ren didn't answer right away. His eyes were on Haru, tracking every movement, every shift in the man holding him. And if I don't? Ren asked finally. The man smiled thinly. Then you don't get the chance to regret it. Takumi couldn't stay still anymore. Please, he said, his voice breaking despite everything. He's just a baby. He's not part of this. The man holding Haru adjusted his grip, too roughly. Haru cried out louder this time. Something snapped. The shift in Ren was immediate. The air around him changed, pressure spiking hard enough that Takumi felt it in his lungs. The controlled alpha was gone. What replaced it was raw, focused, and dangerous in a way that made even the men across the room hesitate. Ren moved. Fast. The first man didn't even have time to react before he was down. The second reached for a weapon, but Ren was already there, striking with brutal efficiency. It wasn't reckless. It was precise, every movement calculated to end the threat as quickly as possible. Takumi saw an opening and moved, heading straight for Haru. The man holding the baby tried to pull back, but Takumi grabbed him, not strong enough to overpower him, but enough to disrupt his balance. Ren closed the distance in a second. The man went down. Haru was free. Takumi caught him immediately, pulling him close, his entire body shaking now that the moment had finally broken. It's okay, he whispered, over and over, even as his own voice trembled. Behind him, the last man was still standing, weapon raised, aimed directly at Takumi. Ren turned just as the trigger started to pull. Ren moved before the shot could finish breaking the air. He slammed into Takumi from the side, twisting his body so his back took the line of fire instead. The sound cracked through the warehouse, sharp and final, and for a split second Takumi thought he hadn't heard it at all. Then he felt the impact through Ren's weight as the alpha drove him down to the concrete. One arm wrapped tight around both Takumi and Haru, shielding them completely. Haru cried out, a thin, terrified sound, but he was alive. Takumi tightened his hold around the baby, heart hammering so hard it blurred everything else. Ren. I'm fine, Ren said, already pushing himself up before Takumi could even process the words. It wasn't true. Takumi could see it immediately. There was blood spreading across Ren's shoulder, dark and fast, but he moved like it didn't exist. The alpha didn't hesitate. He crossed the distance to the last man in 3 steps, knocked the weapon aside, and ended the fight with a precision that left no room for recovery. The warehouse fell silent except for Haru's uneven breathing and Takumi's own ragged attempts to steady himself. Ren stood there for a second longer, making sure there was no one left to move, then turned back. The edge in his expression didn't disappear, but it shifted, narrowing down into something focused entirely on the 2 people in front of him. Let me see him, Ren said. Takumi nodded quickly, adjusting his grip so Ren could check Haru. The baby clung to Takumi's shirt, still crying softly but already calming as the alpha's scent wrapped around them again. Heavier now, stronger, edged with something raw but still controlled enough to soothe. Ren's hand hovered for a second before resting gently against Haru's back, grounding him. "He's not hurt," Ren said after a moment, his voice quieter now. Takumi exhaled, the tension breaking all at once. His legs almost gave out, and this time he didn't fight it. He sank down onto the concrete, still holding Haru close, pressing his face against the baby's hair. I thought he couldn't finish the sentence. Ren crouched in front of him, ignoring the blood soaking through his sleeve. "You don't need to finish it," he said. "He's here." Takumi nodded, but his hands were still shaking. "You got shot," he said, the reality finally catching up. "It's nothing critical," Ren replied, though his breathing was a fraction heavier now. "We need to move." Sirens were faint in the distance, growing closer. Not police. Ren's people. He had called them the moment they left the restaurant. Within minutes, the warehouse filled with controlled movement again, security sweeping the area, securing the remaining threats, and checking the perimeter. Takumi didn't pay attention to any of it. He stayed where he was until one of Ren's men approached carefully. "Boss, we need you back now," he said. Ren nodded once, then looked at Takumi. "Can you stand?" Takumi managed it, still holding Haru tight. "I'm not letting him out of my arms," he said quietly. "No one's asking you to," Ren replied. The ride back felt slower than the one there, even though the driver pushed through the streets with urgency. Takumi sat in the back seat, Haru against his chest, while Ren sat beside him, one hand pressed against his own shoulder to slow the bleeding. The air inside the car was thick with alpha pheromone, stronger than before, but not directed at dominance. It was protective, steady, wrapping around both of them like a barrier. Haru calmed quickly, his breathing evening out as he settled into the scent. Takumi noticed it this time more clearly. Not just instinct, but recognition. His son was responding to Ren specifically, not just any alpha. "Ren, you should go to a hospital," Takumi said after a moment, glancing at the blood again. "I will," Ren replied, "after I make sure you're safe." "I am safe," Takumi insisted. "Because of you." Ren didn't answer right away. He just looked at Haru, watching the baby's small fingers curl and uncurl against Takumi's shirt. Something in his expression softened, almost imperceptibly, before it settled again. Back at the building, everything had changed. The restaurant was closed early, staff sent home, security doubled. William was exactly where Ren had ordered him to be, locked in the office, guarded and no longer in control of anything. Takumi stayed in a separate room while Ren was treated. He didn't like it, but he understood it. Haru had fallen asleep again, worn out from everything. His small body finally relaxed. Takumi sat there, holding him, staring at the door, waiting. Felt longer than it was. When Ren finally walked in, his shoulder was bandaged. His shirt changed, but the tension hadn't fully left him yet. He closed the door behind him and crossed the room slowly, like he was making sure everything was exactly where it should be. "You're still here," Takumi said quietly. "I said I would be," Ren replied. Takumi nodded, then looked down at Haru. "He keeps calming down when you're close," he said. "It's not just tonight. It's every time." Ren didn't deny it. "Yes." Takumi hesitated, then spoke more carefully. "You said he needs a stable alpha presence." "I did." Takumi's grip tightened slightly around Haru. "I can't give him that alone." "No," Ren said, not unkindly. "You can't." Silence settled between them again, but it wasn't the same as before. This time it felt like something waiting to be acknowledged. Takumi looked up. "Then say what you're not saying," he said. Ren held his gaze. For once, there was no distance in it, no calculated restraint. Just something direct and undeniable. "I want to protect him," Ren said. Then, after a brief pause, "And you?" Takumi felt his breath catch, Not from fear this time, but from the weight of it. That's not a small thing to say, he replied. I'm not known for saying small things, Rin said. A faint, almost involuntary smile touched Takumi's lips before it faded again. Protection isn't the same as this, he said, gesturing slightly between them. Rin stepped closer, stopping just within reach again, the same careful distance he had kept before. Then let me be clear, he said. I don't want control. I don't want obligation. If you stay, it's because you choose it. Takumi studied him, searching for anything that felt forced or incomplete. He didn't find it. What he found instead was something steady. Something that had been there since the moment Ren had picked Haru up without hesitation. Haru stirred in his arms, letting out a soft sound before settling again. Takumi looked down at him, then back at Ren. He already chose you, he said quietly. Ren's expression shifted again. Something deeper this time. Something that didn't disappear as quickly. Then I won't walk away from that, he replied. Takumi exhaled slowly. The fear, the exhaustion, the constant edge he had lived on for so long. It didn't vanish, but it eased. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't trying to solve everything alone. Okay, he said. Ren didn't move immediately, like he was giving Takumi space to take the word back if he needed to. When Takumi didn't, he closed the distance the rest of the way, slowly, deliberately. His hand lifted, pausing just short of Takumi's shoulder in a silent question. Takumi leaned into it. That was all the permission Ren needed. He drew them both closer, careful of Haru between them, his touch firm but controlled. The bond wasn't sealed in that moment, not fully, but the choice was clear and mutual. In the days that followed, everything shifted into place with a precision that only someone like Ren could manage. William was stripped of his position, his connections, and his protection. His involvement in illegal Omega trafficking was exposed within the network, leaving him with nowhere to go and no one willing to take him in. It wasn't a quick end, but it was a complete one. Takumi moved into a safer apartment arranged by Ren, not as an order, but as an option he accepted. His role at the restaurant changed as well, no longer just a server but someone with authority and stability, hours that allowed him to be with Haru without risking everything. And Haru thrived. With Ren present, even in small ways, the instability in his scent eased. The restless tension disappeared. He slept better, cried less, and watched the world with that same calm focus, only now without the underlying strain. Weeks later, on a quiet evening after closing, Takumi stood in the empty dining room with Haru in his arms. Ren approached from the far side, his steps unhurried. Haru noticed him immediately, small hands reaching out without hesitation. Takumi handed him over. Ren took the baby with the same instinctive care as the first night, steady and certain. Haru settled against him like he belonged there. Takumi watched them for a moment, then stepped closer. Ren shifted slightly, making space without being asked. Takumi rested against him, the distance between them gone completely now. No fear, no uncertainty, just something solid. For the first time, Takumi didn't feel like he was surviving. He felt like he had somewhere to stay. And that's where Takumi, Ren, and little Haru finally found something they had all been missing, not just safety, but a place to belong. From fear and survival to trust and connection, their story reminds us that sometimes, the most unexpected moments can change everything. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.